Hello everybody, we're so delighted to be with you for this first edition of Inside Africa for the week. The African Union has called on M23 rebels to lay down their weapons and to leave the regional capital of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. But the rebels say they will remain in Goma until they start direct negotiations with the government, and the government refuses to start the talks before M23 rebels pull out. Meanwhile, the United Nations says there are now 140,000 internally displaced people in Goma.
Gabandora Lorenzi and her family can only look on as their neighbour cooks her dinner. They have no food of their own to prepare. 2 of her children and her husband are missing. She's from Ruchuru, a town taken by M23 rebels in August.
They need to stop fighting and agree. They should take us back to our homes. That will make us very happy, because sleeping out in the open and being rained on, there is no food and you're not in your home. That makes life very, very difficult.
The Mugunga camp was built on these lava fields 18 years ago. That's how long some of these people have been here. With the new arrivals, there are now about 50,000 people living here.
We are now trying to coordinate all the humanitarian actors to come and then tackle all the pressing needs, such as water and health and food also. But our intention is to try to weed out those who want really to return home and taking them back, assist them to go back home.
But Zawadi Bwira says she has nowhere to go. She gave birth to her daughter last week. She hasn't named her yet.
I've been forced to leave twice already. I first went to Kanyaruchinia camp, then I came here. I am so hungry. Just look at how the children look. We are desperate.
The aid agency Oxfam says 750,000 people have been forced to leave their homes in eastern Congo this year. There are 25 armed rebel groups terrorizing these communities. What people want to know is when their journey of fear will end.
Over the years, famine has been a major problem in Africa, but what most people do not know is that Africa can feed itself if coordinated efforts are made. The continent holds 60% of the world's arable land.
Many estimate the continent can not only feed its people, but also most of the rest of the world. Sadly, for generations, however, the continent had to be associated with hunger and poverty for all wrong reasons. Even worse, according to the 2012 edition of the State of Food Insecurity in the World, the total number of undernourished people in Africa rose from 175 million in 1990s to 239 million in 2012. But still, there are hopes and progresses.
For the continent, it's very important that we have food security. We have the potential to increase our production because we still have a lot of reserve of arable land. In fact, in the world, we have 60% of the reserve of arable land.
To make sure food shortage and undernourishment are truly eradicated from the continent, the African Union is currently joining efforts with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, as well as taking the Brazilian similar success story in combating hunger.
Africa has the potential to provide food for the world, for the future, and FAO is prepared to assist the countries to improve their agricultural performance.
And that's why Africa is partnering with the rest of the world and the international organizations to make sure the plan of making Africa free of subsistent agriculture is veracity.
We need to look beyond the subsistence. We will try to bring each subsistence farmer in Africa to become a provider for local markets. And local markets can provide food for feeding school lunch programs, hospitals, local markets, etc.
If the food that is produced in Africa can be distributed with a more coordinated ways, like the commodity exchange centers in Ethiopia, then at least the continent can start focusing on exporting its arable land for more sustainable growth and development, and above all, create hunger-free continent.
Now, schools in Nigeria are now benefiting from foreign aid. A new report by a British Commission says aid from the UK has been wasted.
Students being given a lesson in business. This is a government-run secondary school in Abuja. It's one of the better ones here, a place where student grades are steadily improving each year. But a report by a British Commission says schools in 10 other Nigerian states aren't improving, despite receiving over $160 million in foreign aid from the UK. The Independent Commission for Aid Impact says the money is being wasted on bad teachers and poor infrastructure. The report also accuses the Nigerian government of inconsistent funding. The school principal here says there are many reasons why foreign aid to Nigerian schools might not be helping students to learn.
In some schools, some students are up to 80, 100 in a class, which is not healthy for classroom management. So, but the problem of funding to some extent is inadequate, and the managing of those funds, we find out that we are lacking in such areas.
The man who runs basic education in the capital says the money for education wasn't mismanaged.
In managing basic education, there are a lot of checks and balances. Now, so many people come to check what the management of FCT, Universal Basic Education Board, does. Now, if funds are given to us, the FCT administration supervises what happens to the funds. Universal Basic Education supervises what happens to the funds. The Federal Ministry of Education supervises what happens to the funds. So there are a lot of checks and balances.
Conflict is a disagreement. But it looks like those checks and balances are not translating into improved learning. Britain's UK Commission on Aid Impact is recommending the UK government overhaul the educational programmes in which the $160 million was spent. And it wants that done before spending another $200 million between now and 2019 on the same programmes. The government says it will review the report's recommendations.
A public affairs commentator says Nigeria has not benefited strategically from its previous interventions on the African continent. He says the current peacekeeping mission to Mali will be no different. Speaking in Abuja, Dr. Godwin Owowe, however, noted that due to the proximity of Mali and its reputation as a fundamentalist hub, it is important for Nigeria to contribute to the restoration of peace in this area.
Victory is from God alone. The words of the Nigerian Army motto ring true.
ECOWAS has made it clear that it is not, in his view, to negotiate with groups associated to terrorism or violence, but those who have legitimate claims can be also offered a dialogue.
Unlike previous missions Nigeria has taken part in, the United Nations will bear the full cost of this exercise. However, because of porous borders in the ECOWAS sub-region and a steady flow of arms from post-Gaddafi Libya into the Maghreb, there is a fear that what is beginning as a simple exercise may become another Vietnam or Afghanistan. Unconfirmed reports say that the leader of Boko Haram, who currently has a bounty on his head, runs the faceless organization from Mali. This fact might justify the expenditure of human capital.
The origin of the issues, the security issues in Mali, is almost rearing its head in Nigeria. The activities of the Boko Haram cells and all that, which is religious, whether it's religious or political, whatever it is, but under religious undertone. So it's a major externality. So if the religious extremist in Mali succeeds, it will be a major security threat to the Nigerian government in view of the extent to which violence have escalated under the cover of religion.
The death toll in the Liberia-Sierra Leone civil war is shrouded in secrecy, but it is estimated that at least 1,000 Nigerian soldiers may have lost their lives.
Nigeria has lost so much, so much. If you look at 1961, we had the then crisis in the Congo. Till date, we've always 73% of the peacekeeping operations in the world. In Africa, look at what happened in Sierra Leone, Liberia. Nigeria sent her troops. What did we benefit? Nothing.
Founded in 1975, The mission of the ECOWAS is to promote economic integration in the West Africa sub-region. Unfortunately, that comes at great human cost.
Let's take you now to Ghana, where the transporter barges worth $2.58 million to clear invasive weeds on the Volta Lake at Pongba in the Lower Manyang municipality of the eastern region have been commissioned. The barges were purchased with equipment from a grant component of $325,500 funded by African Development Bank.
The Environmental Protection Agency has had concerns over invasive aquatic weeds covering the nation's water bodies. The Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology, the Volta River Authority and financial support by the African Development Bank has brought in 2 heavy aquatic machines and transport barges to manage the invasive weed, which is gradually spreading in the nation's water bodies. The estimated coverage of water hyacinth in the Oti River in 2000 was about 680 hectares. In fact, water hyacinth is a nuisance weed the world over. The Minister of Environment, Science and Technology, Madam Sherry Aite, who commissioned the 2 machines and transport barges, said the Environmental Protection Agency, Volta River Authority, and other state partners have instituted measures to ensure that water hyacinth does not drift south beyond infestation front line to Dambai.
In the Western region, the situation is very serious, and we're doing what we can so that we can also procure additional wheat harvester to help the Western regional communities.
The resident representative of the African Development Bank, Mrs. Marie-Laure Akin Olugbade, noted that the integrated management of invasive aquatic weeds projects is supported by a multinational bank project covering 8 ECOWAS member states, including Ghana.
This project was designed to reduce and control invasive weeds in major water bodies and their impact on ecosystem services such as fishery, water supply, transport.
The acting director of VRA Environmental Sustainable Development, Mr. Kwesi Prempe, noted that VRA has since 1980 been engaged in the fight against invasive weeds on the Volta River, especially the Pong Head Pond. The municipal chief executive for Lower Manya, Mr. Isaac Agbotete, expressed the hope that the removal of the aquatic weeds from the Volta River at Pong will boost economic activities of both fishermen and women in the area.
Away from looking at environmental issues, let's now talk health on this edition of Inside Africa. With the world's highest HIV rate, the Kingdom of Swaziland also battles drug-resistant tuberculosis, the main cause of death among patients with HIV/AIDS. Those who have TB often live in remote mountain homesteads in the Swazi mountains, and getting to a clinic is a challenge. Now, there is a new home injection program that holds out a new hope for tackling TB.
Mainambuli is still a bit hesitant, but soon she will be the personal nurse for her friend Nosipo Mpama. Mpama has drug-resistant tuberculosis and needs medication injected every day for 6 months. But she can't make the several-kilometer journey to the nearest clinic.
It's difficult to join the clinic because I'm still weak. I know her as a good RHM woman, and she's confidential with people's problems.
Nambuli was a RHM, or Rural Health Motivator. Now she's being trained to be a Community Treatment Supporter, or CTS, by the non-profit group Doctors Without Borders, known in French as MSF, for Médecins Sans Frontières. For her, it was only natural to help her friend.
When she asked me, I felt I had the skills to help her with the treatment until she gets better.
The MSF program was launched in 2008 with the idea that if the sick can't travel to treatment, then treatment must be brought to them. In mountainous and remote Swaziland, this promises to help save many lives. But first, the Swazi government had to be convinced to allow MSF to run the project, says MSF Dr. Sido Mogumbo.
Initially, it was a challenge because, even myself, it wasn't going to be easy for me to be treated by someone whom I know is not qualified to do that. But in our case, in our setting, more people have been taught. The benefit they've seen in their support groups, more people are actually getting better.
In Swaziland, MSF has trained about 35 CTS so far and have treated more than 200 patients. It's a good start, but with more than 1,000 cases of drug-resistant TB diagnosed here each year, there is a long way to go.
Moving on, the United Nations Refugee Agency Chief Antonio Guterres has said that a refugee camp in South Sudan is the most dangerous he has seen. But Guterres has found it difficult to convince the inhabitants to move to safer places.
From the air, the Yida refugee camp doesn't look that bad. It's not the usual sea of tattered tarpaulin. Instead, these homes are more permanent. But these people chose to settle just 12 kilometers from the fighting in southern Kordofan that they had run away from. The UN says it's hard to imagine a worse spot.
This is the most threatening situation that I ever met in a refugee camp. Not only because of being close to a war zone, but because there are no access. All things have to be brought by plane during 6 months during the year. And also being close to a war zone, it's very difficult to avoid armed people to come into the camp.
A year ago, the camp was bombed, causing concern that the refugees could increasingly become targets. But people here still don't want to move. Instead, they're settling in at Yida. Other sites have been offered, but the refugees say it's not what they want.
We know that they are mountainous people. They will not even, they will not exist in the muddy areas, as well in the swampy areas.
The UN can't force refugees to relocate, so instead it's offering people incentives to move, but few so far have actually left. As many as 500 new refugees now arrive here every day. But the government in South Sudan and aid organizations want to prevent the camp from growing. They know that the more people who come here, the harder it's going to be to relocate them.
In Kenya, nurses have threatened to paralyze operations in all public hospitals beginning next week if the government does not address their grievances. The Kenyan National Union of Nurses had issued a 7-day strike notice demanding, among other things, a registration of their union and implementation of their salaries and allowances collective bargaining agreement.
They came in solidarity, ready to push for their members' welfare. The nurses' leadership, drawn from the Kenya National Union of Nurses, Kenya Progressive Nurses Association, and the National Nurses Association of Kenya, gave the government a 7-day notice to address their grievances, failure to which the government should brace itself for a countrywide mass action that could paralyze health services in hospitals.
The nurses of this country in the public sector, come that 2012 December, all public health facilities will not have a single nurse.
The union's leadership claimed negotiations with the government in the last 3 months have stalled, and the government has intentionally failed to address any single issue presented by the unions. Top in the list of the demands is to have the Kenya National Union of Nurses registered with immediate effect. The union also wants all nurses on contract employed, redesignation and promotion to deserving nurses, appointment of director of nursing services, and stoppage of union remittance that they claim are illegal.
That the National Labour Board of Kenya can be bought by a few shillings to deny us our rights. We are saying even billions of shillings will be bought everywhere. But the nurses, our bleeding hearts, will stop at nothing.
The unions are also demanding immediate implementation of all approved allowances. They want 5,000 shillings uniform allowance, non-practice allowance of 30,000 shillings, commuter allowance of 15,000 shillings, risk allowance of 20,000 shillings, and 30,000 shillings for those working in surgical theatres, and a call allowance of 10,000 shillings to all nurses. The union says the government should also commit to employ more nurses as the country faces a shortage of 49,245 nurses. Nurses are responsible for the bulk of several services in health centers. The highest paid nurse, who is the chief nurse, takes home an estimated 80,000 shillings, with the lowest which are the majority, taking home 16,000 shillings.
Leaving Kenya, Somali security forces have arrested 20 suspected Al-Shabaab agents and confiscated an assortment of firearms. The forces broke into a house that was suspected to have been a hideout for the militia.
The youth suspected of having links with Al-Shabaab fighters were arrested in a crackdown in the capital's Yakhshid district. Authorities say the crackdown was aimed at preempting possible Al-Shabaab guerrilla attacks in the capital. These arrests follow a series of security operations to rid the capital of the remnants of Al-Shabaab fighters.
AMISOM, working alongside the Somali security forces, has been conducting cordon and search operations to weed out Al-Shabaab. Despite Al-Shabaab's withdrawal from the major towns, they still pose security threats to the public.
African Union Peacekeeping Forces Police Wing have been carrying out these operations with the Somali security forces. Al-Shabaab has lost ground to the allied forces of AMISOM and the Somali National Forces and have fled from their strongholds.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has commended the bilateral relations between Uganda and China. Speaking at the commissioning of the Entebbe Highway project, the president said China has proffered unconditional aid to Ghana. The project was financed by a concessional loan from China Exim Bank with additional funding from the government of Uganda and is expected to take 4 years.
According to the president, some development partners would help out, then take every opportunity to blow their own trumpet.
There is a local proverb in our language here, which says that if a poor man gives you chicken to eat, you will expect you all the time to keep thanking him. Today, tomorrow, you keep thanking. So I was telling them that the Chinese support is not like the poor man's support.
China has spent $350 million, about 910 billion Uganda shillings, on this project.
It is really a project of great political, economic, and social significance. It will benefit the tourism industry and will attract more foreign direct investment to Uganda.
The president says the problem with Uganda was that the leaders spend a lot of time fighting and stealing money. The president urged Ugandans to promote national unity rather than fighting for individual growth and tribalism. The expressway is a 51.4-kilometer dual carriage which will start at the northern bypass, Busega roundabout in Kampala, ending at Entebbe Airport, but with a spur to Munyonyo. It will comprise a 4-lane dual carriage with a 37.2-kilometer road connecting Kampala northern bypass at Busega with the existing Kampala to Entebbe road at Abaita Babiri. Another 14.13-kilometer road will connect Munyonyo through Lweza with the new Kampala-Entebbe highway.
We make our final stop in the north of the continent, where clashes between protesters and police have continued in the central Cairo in Egypt. In order to protect the Prime Minister's building and the Parliament building, the government has begun building a concrete wall on Tahrir Square.
Opponents of President Mohamed Morsi have continued to clash with the police forces in Tahrir Square for the 4th continuous day. It is the worst violence since he took office. Morsi defended a decision to give himself near absolute power to root out what he called evils eating away at the nation of Egypt. The edicts by Morsi, which were issued Thursday, have turned a month of growing polarization into an open battle between his Muslim Brotherhood and liberals who fear a new dictatorship.
We are not the reason for the clashes.
The situation in Tahrir is grave. Liberal politicians are not on the front line, but they also are not trying to stop the violence that comes from their side. Neither does the police forces, who are overwhelmed by the protesters.
No one from the parties tried to stop the violence. It's just us volunteers. We went to the police and told them, please, these are kids, you can't be this brutal. But they didn't listen. We haven't seen such violence since President Mubarak. And on the contrary, President Morsi is also more violent than we have ever seen him before.
People from this side are hitting back because of the reactions of the police. The police must maintain calm, not throw stones at us and act chaotically. In any place in the world, the police would walk with us and protect us, not turn against us for expressing ourselves.
To minimize the violence, the government decided to build a concrete wall that is expected to secure the Prime Minister's office and the upper house of the parliament. This all intend to lock out protesters in Tahrir Square. Pro-liberal supporters are expected to organize a million-man protest on Tuesday to pile more pressure on the president. But his supporters have equally organized a counter-protest to support the constitutional declaration.
Well, that item from Egypt brings us to the end of this edition of Inside Africa. Thanks for watching. And please don't go away, for our programs continue.